Welcome, everybody. Thank you very much for joining this webinar today on the Spaces of Culture call for proposals. My name is Robert. I manage the Spaces of Culture project based here in Brussels, but I'm not here alone. We manage the program together with Toriso Buzenica, who is based in South Africa.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Toriso Musaneke, and I'm based in South Africa, and I co-lead the project with Robert. Welcome.
And we're also joined by our colleague Lilian, who is going to be mostly in the background doing a little operational support here and there. Spaces of Culture, of course, is the topic of this webinar. It's implemented by EUNIC, which is the National Institute for Culture. During the first part of the webinar, I will be explaining a little bit more what EUNIC is and what it is about and how to connect. Firstly, I just want to say thank you for joining in such a large group. We had hundreds of subscribers to this webinar. Of course, it always remains to be seen if all are going to join, but we already see quite a large group here in the room. We also had around 40 different countries in sub-Saharan Africa represented in this long list of subscribers. So I think that's a nice indication of the appetite and the interest in the program that we do. So before we go into the topics of today and the content, just a couple of household messages. So first of all, if you could keep yourself muted during the presentation, that would be much appreciated. If you could also rename yourself with your name, the organization, and also the country that you're joining us from, that will make it easier to identify who is in the room. The webinar, it will be lots of presentation from our side on the different aspects of the call for proposals, but there will definitely be also some space for Q&A. So feel free to already raise some of your questions or comments during the presentation. We have an online Google Sheet that you can use to that end. We're introducing the Google Sheet. Also, because we have such a big group, it might be possible that we're not able to respond to all your questions in the session. So that will make it easier for us to afterwards get back to you if that's needed. The webinar is recorded, so you will receive this later. We will send the recording to all who subscribe to the webinar. So if you missed something or if you want to watch it back later, of course you can. You can, of course, also send the recording to any of your colleagues who were not able to join today. Another household message is that you can turn on the closed caption function, which will transcribe what we're presenting. Especially if English is not your native tongue, or you come from a francophone or a different country, that might be very much helpful for you to follow the webinar. The webinar will be held in English, I have to say from the very start, and we will aim for the session to take 90 minutes maximum, so you know roughly when we will be ending the session. So then on to the topics at hand. Let me just start with our presentation. What we want to do today, of course, is mostly talk about the Spaces of Culture program, the opportunity that is the current open call for proposals. But we first want to give a couple of introductions on the wider Africa-Europe Partnerships for Culture program that Spaces is part of. We want to give a little bit of insights on EUNIC as a network. Who are the members? Where are they located? How, of course, can you connect to them? And then we will move on. And then we will move on to the Spaces of Culture call, the criteria, what to do for the application, what are we expecting, what are we hoping to see with proposals,
to get started,
and what are the different processes that will lead to selection of projects. We will zoom in heavily on one particular criterion of the Spaces of Culture, which is on this triangular partnership. Of course, we will go into that much deeper, but we know that a lot of questions on people's minds, on organizations' minds, is on how to form this partnership where is this coming from, who to contact, and how to start shaping this. So a big chunk we want to dedicate on that particular topic, how to find them. We also want to give you some inspiration from projects that are currently implemented under the wing of Spaces of Culture. Of course, a couple of words on the process, the timeline, how to apply, and everything. We will have some space for Q&A, as I said from the start. So it's a rich program. We will tag team a little bit between Toriso and myself. And as I said, during the webinar, feel free to drop your question or your comment in the sheet so that we could refer to that later. So then the first topic of the webinar is just to look at this bigger Africa-Europe Partnerships for Culture program that Spaces is part of. This is a pretty large-scale program that is funded by the European Commission, in more particular, the Directorate General for International Partnerships. So that is the DG in the European Commission that is responsible for Europe's relationships with other parts of the world. The Africa-Europe Partnerships for Culture program it's large. It's consists of different components. The bulk is a 30 million program that is spread out over different components, as you can see on the slide. There is a continental component. There's one component that is focusing on West African countries and one component that is focusing on Southern African countries. The Spaces of Culture component is part of the continental component, just to make it more complicated. And the main aim of this program is, you can see it there, to strengthen and expand and build on partnerships between African and European actors in the cultural field, in the civil society, and to enable deeper collaborations between the two continents. It's a rather comprehensive umbrella program, if you will, and what it mostly supports is exchange, it's co-creation, it's this intercultural dialogue between the different continents. And very important throughout this entire program is that it supports co-creative projects and activities that are really based on this notion of equal and fair partnerships. And I think what is important to realize is that because it has all these different components, sometimes it's very focused on a certain discipline. Think of heritage, or think of festivals, or type of activities or type of projects, or a particular type of funding. So the continental components of this program also includes a mobility scheme, including for individual artists. So there's all these different things that you can consider outside of the Spaces of Culture component, which ultimately is a relatively small part of this wider program. So we would definitely encourage you to, explore all these other parts of this program, because there might be in there something that could be really useful for you as an organization or as an individual artist. So to be sure to check this wider program. But today then, it is about this one particular part of the continental component, which is the Spaces of Culture program. And that is where we come in, a EUNIC as a network. So then just to explain a little bit more what is EUNIC, I'm sure that plenty of you, you will have experience with working with EUNIC, with our members, through projects, through activities, sometimes as a group of organizations, but sometimes with one or two of our members. But for many, it might still be very new, like what is EUNIC? Why does it exist? Who are these members of this network? Where are they located? What do they do? And how can I connect to them? So in this webinar, we also want to dedicate a little bit of time to explain what this network is all about. So EUNIC, it stands for European Union National Institutes for Culture, and it is the network of cultural institutes of member states. So that means basically organizations active at their national level that have the mandate or the assignment to get engaged in international cultural relations outside of their borders. So it's a network that now exists roughly for 20 years. We have 39 members, which are based across all 27 EU member states and also in the United Kingdom and in Ukraine. So when you look at the map of Europe, we have quite the good geographical spread. The bulk of the work of EUNIC is not necessarily only done within the borders of Europe, but throughout the globe. We have presence in over 100 countries, and I'll explain in a little bit what that means, presence of EUNIC. We are a strategic partner to the European Union when it comes to the EU getting involved in cultural relations. I'm not going to bore you with a long policy brief, but the EU as a supranational body is more and more getting engaged in doing cultural collaboration across the world, as many individual countries are doing in national strategies. And we, as EUNIC, we are an independent organization. We are a foundation or an association with our secretariat based in Brussels. So we are not part of the EU, but we do work quite closely together with them. So that is EUNIC in a nutshell. Zooming in on, as we call it, local presence of EUNIC, our members are working together in so-called clusters. So clusters are established in countries or cities where a few of our members, that could be embassies, that could be branches of national institutes like the Goethe Institute or the Institut Français, where they are located and working together. So a cluster is established when three of them are located and doing things together. And you can see here on the map where they are located. So it's quite well spread across the world. However, of course, beyond these clusters, there are plenty of countries where, of course, there will be embassies, there will be individual member states and their institutes located. However, they're not formalized in the so-called clusters. For the Spaces of Culture program, that's not important. And I will explain later what we mean with this. So that's why with the Spaces of Culture, we invite project proposals from any country in sub-Saharan Africa, whether there is a cluster established or not. Important though to know is that these groups of EUNIC members, that they often have long-standing relations with their host country. Sometimes they're relatively new, sometimes they have big networks in the local cultural and civil society field, and sometimes they're not. So the activity and the, let's say, embeddedness of EUNIC, it really differs per country. And we, as a central secretariat, we try to deepen these relationships through, amongst other things, the funding program, such as the European Spaces of Culture. Now then, zooming in on sub-Saharan Africa, which of course is, you know, the geographical focus of what we're doing here today, is you can see that there are 18 so-called formalized clusters across sub-Saharan Africa. You will see your own country represented here or not. But as I said, you know, EUNIC members don't only have presence and offices in these 18 countries. So that's why I'm saying the Spaces of Culture program is much broader, accessible to different countries. And another reason why I'm explaining all this, it's not only for you to understand what EUNIC is and what we do and why we are managing the Spaces of Culture program, but one of the most important criteria in the Spaces of Culture program centers around shaping a partnership between local civil society cultural stakeholders and those EUNIC members. So we think it's important, you know, for you to realize who EUNIC is, where they are, and later we will come back to how to contact them, because they are expected to be part of your projects as a very important integral partner. So this is about EUNIC. Of course, if you have any doubts or questions, we can always come back to that, but we wanted to keep this as an introduction to the network. But now we want to focus in on the main topic at hand, which of course is the Spaces of Culture program and the call for proposals, which is now open. And for that, I gladly hand over to Teresa.
Thank you, Robert. Good afternoon, good morning, everyone, and thank you for those who just joined. So in terms of the Spaces of Culture program, what is now an extension of the Global Spaces of Culture program, but with focus on Sub-Saharan Africa. And what is very unique about the Spaces of Culture is its emphasis on enabling co-creation and collaboration in cultural relations between projects taking place in Sub-Saharan Africa and with European partners. And what also makes it very unique is that through these new networks, local projects are able to reach new audiences, both on the African continent and in Europe. And this expands the reach as well as future impact of the projects. So we first launched the call in 2025 and supported 7 projects. This year, we will again fund only 7 projects and bringing us closer to our aim of supporting an estimated of 21 projects in the year of 2028. I think if we just go down by Gilbert's slide. So before we get into the details of what is cultural relations and how this is intrinsic in the projects we are looking to fund, here is a quote by one of our project partners that we funded this year. And he basically says, Urban Resonances reimagines international cultural relations not as an export or exchange, but as co-creation rooted in respect, reciprocity, and shared purpose. And so, when we look at 8 months into these projects, this code really resembles the process and both the output of what some of these projects have experienced within the implementation of the activities. And of course, working towards concepts such as collaboration, mutual learning within the context of their respective projects. So we will come back to urban residents when we give examples of projects that can possibly inspire you and to also help us contextualize the eligibility criteria. So in terms of what we're looking for, so the Spaces of Culture program is looking to fund projects that really take any format, focusing on arts, creative industries, digitalization, education, gender, heritage, human rights. The list can go on, youth, etc. However, there is no particular thematic area that we are looking for because we want to encourage that the work that you're doing relates to the local context. And so this includes a clear description and alignment with the target group, the challenges that that local context might be going through, but as well as opportunities. And so how you marry this, or rather your project idea with the project objectives, it's very important, including the alignment with the EUNIC members and the EU delegation. And so by a concrete activity, what we mean is an activity that is very specific and rooted in reality. So not just a broad idea. So for example, instead of saying we want to support artists or we're looking at, this particular idea, you might want to really describe the workshop series that the project activity wants to enable. You might want to describe the exhibition, the performance, the learning tool, if it is a project based on education and human rights, or you might want to even describe the collaboration that you have experienced or you're already developing with these particular partners. However, when we again look at the concrete activity, it does not need to be final. So meaning that your concept note is the starting point that will further develop, that you will further develop together with your partners, including the EUNIC members. And so when you approach your partners, you are all coming together on an equal footing to co-develop a project proposal that responds to local challenges and addresses relevant topics with a view of achieving social impact. The main project activities are required to be placed locally. So this is in terms of the project taking place in Sub-Saharan Africa. And we are aware that the definition provided by the United Nations or even the African Union is a bit different. Therefore, as EUNIC, we follow the definition provided by the European Union, which encompasses most regions on the continent. And you can find the list of the Sub-Saharan African countries in the proposal on pages 13 and 14, right in the footnote. So if you move to the slide around cultural relations, We touched a little on the values of this program in the beginning. And one of the principles which we really want to unpack a bit more is the principle of cultural relations. And so this is very important as it anchors the program, but it also provides meaning to what the program wants to achieve and how it will do this through the triangular partnership. And so a key principle of cultural relations, is a people-to-people approach. Introducing a new way of working, shifting from top-down to bottom-up approaches to a more horizontal form of collaboration. And so with the modern cultural relations approach, we're moving away from public diplomacy or donor-recipient relationship to African and European partners working side by side, shaping priorities together, sharing resources, and building trust. And so we have also seen one funded projects, and what Spaces of Culture wants to do is to facilitate longer-term funded projects through the process of building sustainable and equal partnerships between the two continents. So the challenge, or rather the opportunity, is that when you are implementing your activities, you're also working towards the future impact. And so the program encourages long-term institutional partnerships between the two countries. And so mutual listening and learning begins really at the start of approaching your partners. We know that a lot of you guys are very nervous about this triangular partnership and how to reach your partners, but this is where the co-creation and fair collaboration begins. By co-developing the concept note, submitting the proposal, and then implementing the project activities. It's really all a process. So this is a process we encourage and support as the Spaces of Culture program, because we know how challenging putting these concepts such as collaboration, mutual listening, trust, in practice can be a challenge, especially when forming new partnerships. However, the opportunity here is that the program, being a yearly funded program, has made space for these concepts to be negotiated between all partners. And we see this with the 7 projects that we have been supporting in the last 8 months. So if we go into the selection criteria, if you look at the proposal on page 12 and 13, the eligibility criteria is really summed up into 6 areas where the jury members will use this point system to adjudicate your proposals. So the relevance to local context, I believe I did speak back to that in the beginning. And so I'm just going to move on to innovation. So when we look at innovation, we're really looking at how you're designing these activities to link and align with the local context. And what does the participation of each partner bring in promoting social cohesion, inclusivity, or even artistic freedom? So innovation is not necessarily limited to digital technology, but rather it's a transformative approach that is responding to relevant thematic areas of your local context in relation to the wider context. When you look at partnership approach, we are looking for proposals that will clearly and concretely describe the added value and involvement of each partner. So we are aware that the role of each partner and the involvement will look different. However, we still encourage that this is not one-sided. And of course, going back to the concept note, this is where the conversation begins about, what is the capacity of each organization in terms of working horizontally on the project activities. When we think about the impact foreseen, we're really looking for midterm to long-term impact on the target group. Again, thinking about building sustainable projects beyond the funding period. The expected results throughout the timeframe of the project, really need to look at, again, this midterm, long-term impact. So it is important that your proposals clearly describe the activities, how the target group or the stakeholders involved will benefit from this work. And then when we consider the sustainable development goals, the proposal should demonstrate which objectives or activities contribute to the achievement of the SDGs. Again, in the proposal, we do emphasize that we're not necessarily saying that the organization or even the projects should focus on all 12 or 6 SDGs, but it should really be unique to your project and what already exists. So when we think about feasibility, so this is in relation to the budget and the timeframe. How feasible is this project, and what mitigation plan do you have in place to manage any risks? Again, thinking about all 7 project partners, is this really feasible? And then with the principle of fair collaboration, we also want to emphasize that fair and equitable remuneration to local and both European artists and experts will be assessed. And then the last one, environmental sustainability. So this area addresses environmental sustainability as a topic, but also in practice. This encourages a deeper dive into how activities are sensitive to the realities affecting the environment, whether it's directly or indirectly. And what mechanisms have you considered to support environmental impact? So now I'm just going to hand it over to Robert to just expand more on the eligibility criteria, focusing on the triangular partnership and a few examples of some of the projects that we are supporting.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Terizo. So the eligibility criteria, they form, the basis of whether to go into the selection process or not. So the contribution that you can request is maximum 50,000 euros. And this is in line with EU regulations. The co-funding that we ask for in each proposal is at least 5% of the grant that you request. So it's not necessarily 5% of your total budget, but the example you can see there, if you go for the full grant, 50,000 euros, that means that we would like to see a co-funding of at least 2,500 euros, et cetera, et cetera. This co-funding, it could come from any source. It could come from any kind of national funding. It could come from the different partners' own contribution. Be it the local partners, be it the EUNIC members. It could come from sponsorship or other sources. The only source that is not allowed as co-funding is from the EU delegation or from a different EU pot, because that would mean double funding, as the Spaces of Culture is already EU funding. So the partnership that we ask for in all proposals is a minimum of 3 local organizations. Local organizations is a very broad definition. We'll come back to that in a second. 3 EUNIC members that are active in your country or in neighboring countries, and the EU delegations. And that's the EU delegation. What we mean with that is the official delegation of the European Union in the country where the project is taking place. Because aside from EU members and EU countries, the EU as such also has the delegations, it functions as an embassy, and it is like the central bureau of the EU's representation in many different countries, and they are also present across the entire continent. So yeah, Teresa already mentioned it. So the activities, they should be taking place in sub-Saharan African countries only. It could be in different countries at the same time. So yes, exploring cross-border projects and cross-border activities is definitely encouraged, because it can enrich what you're doing with your projects, and it could, of course, bring added value, new networks, new audiences and everything. Of course, at the same time, be aware that this is, or it could add complexity to managing your project or to manage audiences. Of course, language could be a barrier to really shape a strong partnership. So we definitely encourage looking into a cross-border project, but it is by no means required. Yeah, of course, a project that focuses on only one country or one city could be as good as one that goes international. Projects should be taking place between the 1st of September 2026 and the 31st of August 2027, meaning there's a maximum runtime of 1 year. Of course, it could be shorter. This is just the window within the project should be taking place. Of course, we see that activities often take place in a smaller window, which of course is allowed. And then that extra part on, looking into the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which Teresa already explained. It's a requirement in the application form to explain which UN SDG does your project or your project proposal contribute to or aim to contribute to, and to have that explained really well and very concretely. So these are the eligibility criteria, but we want to focus heavily on one of them, the most important one, which is this triangular partnership model that should be part of any spaces of culture proposal. So just to reiterate, what we're talking about with this triangular shape or this triangular partnership is on the one hand, excuse me, have a number, at least three, key local cultural and or civil society partners being part of your consortium, of your project team. The understanding of what kind of organizations is very, very broad. So it could be any kind of, it needs to be a legal entity, that one, but it could be a cultural organization, it could be a network, it could also be an organization that is not necessarily solely focusing on doing cultural activities. It could also be a public body, it could be a municipality, it could be an educational institute. So the understanding there is very, very broad. However, of course, what we do want to see is that all the different partners, they bring in something special to the table. So if you look at what kind of partners you want to work with together, look for complementarity of, different expertise, different backgrounds, and different assignments. With the Spaces of Culture program, we really like to put specific attention, to widening access to these collaborations, to organizations that are less commonly involved in such intercontinental projects. So what we hope for, that we see in these partnerships, is that it is also new actors entering the space of working with Europe or with certain other partners in the host country. So that definitely adds also to this innovation of partnerships, innovation of networks. And of course, the role of the local partners, it's basically from the beginning to the end. Of course, any kind of local partner will be key in identifying what is this local context that we're working in, because it's basically your context. What are the needs? What are the challenges that we can address by these projects? And for that reason, it is very important to keep talking to the different partners involved in the very first early stages of design, implementation until the finalization and evaluation of the project. So what we often see is that the local partners are very strongly in the lead of everything when it comes to the project. But of course, the triangular partnership has three different angles. And the second one is the EUNIC angle. So what we ask for is for each consortium to have at least 3 EUNIC members parts of the proposal. So coming back to what I said before about who is EUNIC, where are they located? These are, the local branches of cultural institutes like the Goethe Institute, the Institut Français, or other, in some cases, it's other structures that are representing EU member states. In many cases, these could also be embassies, because not every European country has a big national cultural institute, but does this kind of work through their embassies. So if you're looking to identify who they are, it could well be an embassy of a European country. So we say a minimum of 3 EUNIC members is required. This mostly counts for those countries where there is a cluster formalized. So you saw that map before with 18 different countries. In those cases, we would need to see at least 3 members of EUNIC. For other countries, we can make an exception and put the minimum up on 2 EUNIC members, because we know that in many of these countries, there is very little presence. There are only few of those cultural institutes, or none even in some cases. And there's not even that many European embassies in there. So for those cases, we would ask for 2. Of course, some of these institutes, they have a mandate, or they work in different countries at the same time. So just as an example, we know, for instance, that the Goethe Institute in Ethiopia also works in South Sudan. So if you are in South Sudan and you are looking for EUNIC members to work with, one option could be to work together with the Goethe Institute in Ethiopia, because they also have the mandate to work in South Sudan. But that goes for different countries and different members at the same time. So we know it can take a little bit of time to find out who they are and where they are, but we can also help in identifying that, and I'll get back to that in a second. And the third part of the triangular shape is the EU delegations. So what I was saying, the EU delegations, they are, you can see them as EU embassies in your country. They are expected to be part of this, but at the same time, we also know that cultural expertise and experience will lie most heavily with the local partners and with the EUNIC partners, because it is, in most cases, their daily business. Whereas the EU delegation, because they are embassies, they have many different topics and programs that they run. Culture is often only a very, very small part. So when we look at roles and responsibilities, we acknowledge, we know that often the EU delegations, they can be formal part of these projects, but very often it's difficult for them to really find their place or to find a lot of capacity and time to get involved in these projects. And that is okay. You know, we can live with that. There's no need to look into how can the different partners do exactly the same or put exactly the same amount of hours or put in the same work. The complementarity there is just very important to find. So the minimum number of partners for each proposal is 7 or maybe 6 in case it's a country without EUNIC presence. But we do expect all partners, especially the local partners and the EUNIC partners, to actively contribute and together co-create a proposal, and not just leave that to one of the partners who already has a very clear idea and practically already a proposal written. We really need this to be co-created together. Oops. So just as an example, what does that then look like in practice? So we're taking 2 projects that we're funding at the moment, one in Kenya and one in Togo. And we're just listing here the partners that are working together in these triangles. So you can see in Kenya, you see Santuri East Africa, Creatives Garage, Black Rhino VR, which are, you know, key stakeholders based in Nairobi in Kenya, to a large extent, indeed leading the way in programming, in communicating, in setting the scene of this project. But they are working together with the Goethe Institute, the Alliance Française, the Italian Institute, and also the British Council. And sorry, I don't see what's there. It's, of course, the Embassy of Portugal, as complementary partners. So these partners, you know, they bring in different things. They bring in different contacts. They bring in, you know, a different expertise. They bring in a little bit of funding also, it's possible. They offer their spaces for activities, or they team up together to shape the program of the Frequency Shift project. And then in the third part of the triangle, of course, again, we see the EU delegation to Kenya, which, you know, can have a very strong role and aims also to have a strong role in, for instance, communicating about the project and communicating the results, because often EU delegations have a different audience and a different network that they communicate to than cultural stakeholders or EUNIC, because yeah, there is something as a complementarity that you can find. And then on the right, you see a similar but slightly different example in Togo, which is actually one of those multi-country projects. We call it Togo because the lead partner is based in Togo. But as you can see on the list, is that it is a mix of cultural and civil society stakeholders based in Togo and in Mali, because it is a cross-border project. Who together are looking, you know, shaping the programming of the project, and they are working together with, you know, EUNIC members in different countries. So you see the Goethe Institute, which is the Goethe Institute in Togo. You see the Cercle Culturel Germano-Malien in Mali, and the Institut Français, which again is in Togo. So there you can also see how this cross-border collaboration can also include EUNIC members in different countries. And again, a third partner in this one is the EU delegation. So a question that we often get is about roles and responsibilities. Like, okay, fine, we can include different partners, but where does everybody come in? It really depends heavily on the context. It really depends on who are also the different partners, who are the EUNIC members that you bring in. As I was saying, the EUNIC members often have a very long-standing relationship with the country that you're working in. They have big networks, they have structures, they have physical space, they have communication channels. You can work together with the EUNIC members in also doing the admin of a project, like the management of the project, the reporting, all that can also be a shared responsibility. And of course, funding could be, of course, the EUNIC members could be a source of co-funding. And the closer you work together on a proposal and on a project, the more likely is also that, you know, EUNIC members will really think, oh, this is part of me. I am part of this project, which could then also lead to more involvement of that side. As I was saying, the EU delegations, they have less cultural expertise and experience, so they will be less involved in programming or, you know, setting up the project, in designing everything. But where they can come in is communicating through their social media channels, offering their space also for meetings or for events. It often works well if, for instance, the EU ambassador, which is the head of delegation, comes into these projects and, yeah, also comes in as a sort of ambassador for this particular project. It sometimes even open doors, you know, when you need to open doors for to municipalities or to local or national authorities, or for to obtain permits. Sometimes the involvement of the EU delegation can actually tip that over the edge and provide you with the info or the permit that you need. So together with them, also you can think creatively of how different people and organizations can come in, because often it is not something that is very obvious, and only, you know, by discussing this thoroughly from the very start, you can get to those solutions. And we are fully aware, of course, that shaping this triangular partnership, it can be a difficult process, because many of you won't have you know, contacts already with EUNIC members and or with the EU delegation. So that's why we're saying this is very important to do right now, rather than, you know, looking into the details of a proposal or activities or anything else. Look for what is the main idea that's on your mind for a project, and with this, go to the different partners you want to work with, and then from then on, see where different organizations can come in, can also commit to working together, and then together work out the entire project proposal. So yeah, this is just a little bit of a summary of what I was explaining before. Of course, this will all be shared afterwards. So in case you're taking notes, you can, but you don't have to, because this will be shared afterwards. You see here the summary of what I was saying. Who can be the local partners? It's a very wide understanding. The EUNIC members, who are they again? And the delegations, who are they? And yeah, you can reach out to us as well if you're not sure where to find this. But we also have different ways to help you with this. Just one practical note about these partnerships. So all partners that you identify as being part of the team of the project, they will be required to submit a commitment letter. We have a template for that. It's not a very difficult letter. It's just that we need to see a proof, a demonstration of the partners that are being written into the proposal, into the application, are indeed on board with this, and indeed are working together to create the proposal. One of the partners, and that needs to be either one of the local partners or one of the EUNIC members, will need to be designated to receive the grants that we will be giving after the selection, if selected, and also to sign an agreement with us, with EUNIC. So this will be the partner that is responsible for many different things, you know, for a few admin things, such as receiving the funding, allocating it, according to your internal agreements with the different partners, overseeing the budgets, overseeing things like reporting. Of course, they will also be a very important contact point for us if we want to reach out on the status of the project or if there's any questions. So this will be a very key partner in the mix. Of course, this does take a certain operational capacity to deal with a 50,000 euro grant, and to deal with things like reporting and with a little bit of coordination between the different partners. So it could be that, one of the partners, you might not feel super comfortable with taking on this role. This is absolutely fine. This is also part of the conversation that you need to have, maybe not at the very start, but at some point when you're writing the proposal, is to see who could this partner be? Who could we put forward as designated admin lead, as we call it? In the proposal, you will also be asked to do a very short self-assessment of your role. So there, it'll be good to indicate experience, if you have experience with receiving grants, receiving EU grants, or leading such pretty complex constellation of partners. That's the stuff that would be important to put in the proposal to convince the jury and us that particular partner would be the most important one and the most suitable one to do this admin leadership. So now, how finding these partners? Who are they? Where are they based? By now, it should be clear who they are. But of course, if you don't have any experience with them, it might be difficult to actually find them. So what we have is a list. It's not complete. We have a list of EUNIC members that are based in Sub-Saharan Africa. This is based on our knowledge and our contacts also with their headquarters. In some countries, you will see it's a much longer list than in others. And that's, coming back to what I was saying before, in some countries, there's a large group of embassies and EU cultural institutes that are doing programming, that have events and activities already happening. And there are countries where it's very limited, either because of the size of the country or because some countries are clustered together for some embassies or for some cultural institutes to work. So one of the first steps to take when you're thinking of who can I reach out to, who can I find in my particular country, is to look at that list. Of course, you can also, after looking at that list and seeing who is available, or looking into your existing network, of course, you can reach out to us as well if you have trouble reaching out or finding contact with these different partners. And then the second one in the middle, it's a very, very important thing in this whole process to find partners and to adhere to the partnership criterion, is to develop a concept idea of your partner of your project, and to share that with parties that you are interested in to work with. So if you think, great, I see here a number of EUNIC members, I see here the delegation in my country, I want to reach out to them. What we would ask you to do is to come up with a short concept note of this idea and to reach out to them ASAP, because we know it takes time for this partnership to be forged, from the initial contact to entering a conversation what this is about, to getting the different partners committed to do this together. So that's why it's important to take that step at this point already, to come up with that concept note, which could be free form. We encourage you to do a one-page concept note. You can do additional material. You could even use video or other kind of material if you wish to do so. But we would recommend you do this before the 30th of April. So that's why, we have formulated that quite strongly, just because we know that this is a very important first step to take at this point. And only from there, you will have then enough time to develop the project proposal together, to exchange on, okay, what is the initial idea? Again, do we all align? Do we all agree that this is the road to take? And are we all fully aware of what we're actually aiming with this project? Because sometimes concepts and terminology and everything, it also takes time to fully grasp what the project is, especially in an intercultural collaboration. that is a very, very important step to take. There's another question that we often get is about these cross-continental partnerships. Of course, we're talking about Europe, Africa, cultural relations. So the partnerships, the partners, they are definitely illustrating that particular context. So if you also have a partner that is based in Europe or in a different continent, it could be in the Americas, it could be in Asia. We get questions like this as well. They can be part of a partnership, but of course only after the formal criteria are met. So yes, it could be very interesting to engage a Brazilian organization in a project, for instance, in Angola or in Mozambique. But of course, the core partnership of SSA-based organizations and EUNIC members, it needs to be met before other partners come in. And the leading role, of course, should be very strongly with the local partners rather than partners coming from different continents or different geographies. And of course, activities, they should be placed on the continent, on the sub-Saharan African continent itself. So maybe you would ask, like, why? What's with this focus on this triangular partnership? What's with this focus on EUNIC? Because the bigger program is Africa-Europe Partnerships for Culture. The aim is to build on existing relations and existing networks, but also build new networks of organizations that are active on the continent. And because EUNIC has this big network that is active, the first step is to look at who they are, how to work with them. And of course, if other European partners come into the mix afterwards, that is perfectly fine. Some of the questions in the registration form focused on that. So hopefully that will answer yours. So yeah, that's on the partnerships and how to find them and everything. Do feel free to come to us and say, I'm having trouble in connecting with these institutes or these embassies in my particular country or with the EU delegation, and we can come in to help. But then the next point on the agenda, and you might have questions still, of course, but we will get to that. But first, we want to give you a little bit of inspiration from projects that we're currently funding, and for that, we go back to Teresa.
Thank you, Robert. So when you think back to the selection criteria and the 6 areas which your proposal needs to align with, the next 2 slides are examples from 2 of the 7 projects we are supporting. So Frequency Shift is a project that is based in Nairobi, Kenya, with 7 project partners. When you look at the triangular model that Robert referenced earlier on. So it is a bold community-driven initiative to activate a multimedia cultural radio studio that amplifies local voices, bridges cultural divides, and prototypes a future-facing creative ecosystem. So through this collective of 3 local partners, they actually have another 4th local partner, just based on the collective and how they initially met. With the support from the EU partners, the activities include artist residence, development of a digital radio platform that can be accessible to a global audience, immersive media through digital technology, and the production of a music and digital innovation festival, which actually took place in February this year. And they're also going to offer media production training. So these activities cover the areas of innovation, impact, and alignment with the SDGs, such as access to education through the media production training that they will be offering, as well as alignment when you think about the SDGs, when you look at the sustainable cities, and how they're doing this is through the use of the mall as a community cultural hub where this collective meets as well as implements the activities in Nairobi. So the next project is Urban Residences. And this is a cross-border project actually between Togo and Mali. So I did see the question around how to find a EUNIC member in Mali. But then I have answered it, hopefully, in the chat. And so with this project as a cross-border project, It's an artistic initiative that really transforms youth centers into vibrant cultural hubs through puppetry, visual arts, and public performances. So this is a good example of a project that is based in a country where there is limited EUNIC cluster. However, with the support from 2 EUNIC members and 1 EU delegation, they have submitted a very strong application, but which also speaks to the principles of the program. So as you can see, in comparison to frequency shift or even other projects that we supported that look at digital innovation, the ambition of this particular project is quite big. However, they've really managed to bring in, new collaborations along the process. And what is also unique about this project is the art discipline of puppetry and site-specific performance, driving the objective of transforming youth centers into active cultural hubs through residencies, workshops, and performances. So that's just an example of, what we mean when we're not necessarily what we mean when we are defining the 6 criteria areas of innovation, of impact, of environmental sustainability, and of course, fair collaboration. So you can read more about the projects on our website, just to see the diversity and impact of these projects and organizations involved. So when we go into the next slide, so Robert did touch on the funding amount and what is eligible regarding the co-funding. So I'm not going to really speak back to that again, but I do want to, really outline a few points on the budget and what changes we've made this far. So when you look at the application documents to download, we have included a standardized budget template, which should be completed and included in the application submission. What we have done differently this year is that we've added columns for you to draft the budget in the local currency with a requirement to also complete these costs in euros. We have also included a justification for expenses sheet where you can go into details about what this line item is and for what purposes aligned to the objectives of the activities and overall project. And so the eligible costs are those, as Robert mentioned, related to the project and its actions. And examples of these are artists and expert fees, travel and accommodation, catering, rental of venues or equipment, or even production material. The eligible costs also include hiring of external coordinators, such as a project manager or a consultant, to really help you as a practitioner, make sure that this work is implemented and according to the timelines. And an example of this, we have seen it in even our current projects where, based on the concept note, but also the project proposal that was submitted, project coordinators end up bringing in consultants or even project managers to help them implement this project, but also coordinate all of these 7 partners, in one space. And so we do encourage the hiring of an external coordinator to support delivery, to carry out certain components of the project. So due to EU regulations, unfortunately, certain communication costs are not eligible. And these are such as setting up a website or social media promotion and the production of promotional materials such as branded T-shirts for your organization. So partners will be expected to cover such costs outside of the budget. And again, this is possible. We've seen it with our recent project that had that hosted the Kilele Festival, where they basically covered the communication costs that were not eligible within their own operations budget. So event photography, videography, documentation, and publications following project activities are eligible. However, if the eligibility costs, especially around communications, are not clear, please reach out to myself or Robert for further clarification, or even for us to look over your budget before the deadline. I'll hand it over to Robert.
Yeah, thank you very much. So before we go into a bit of Q&A, a couple of words on the selection process and the timeline of our call. So as you can see, the selection process is heavily based, of course, on our deadlines. The deadline is the 21st of June for final submission of your proposal. So that's the full proposal, after which, of course, it is up to the selection. Before that, we have this recommended deadline of the 30th of April to share your one-page concept note ideas with partners. So that is the moment. By then, we expect or we hope that you will have reached out to the partners that you want to work with, that you are in contact with them, that you have shared the first idea. You don't have to send that to us in advance. So once you have your concept idea ready that you want to share with partners, do go ahead. We don't, because we will only delay it if it needs to be up for approval. And it'll be smoother just to immediately go to the different partners. The selection will be done a couple of weeks after we received your proposal. So we as a team, we will be doing an eligibility check. So once we receive your submitted proposals, we will look into, is the partnership criterion respected? Is it complete? Is the budget complete? Is everything filled in? All those eligibility questions we will do as a team. In case, there is a small mistake or there's something missing, we will have a short grace period for you to correct, but that will be a very short grace period. So please ensure that it is complete, and it is eligible by the time you submit. We will then share it with the jury. Our jury is independent, so we are not the jury. They are not part of the EUNIC team. They're also not part of EUNIC members. They are independent experts in Africa-Europe cultural relations. So colleagues that have a long-standing experience with doing this work, coming from different disciplines or different backgrounds, also different geographies across the two continents. They will together look at the proposals and together make a selection for funding. We will give all applicants feedback on their proposal. So both those who are selected and those that are not selected, we will give feedback on the proposal that will hopefully help in a different proposal or a different funding application you will be doing, either with us or to a different source, of course. And with those that are selected, we will give feedback that we then expect indeed to be implemented, because often this has to do with budget clarification or with certain points that the jury thinks should really be changed or improved before you start with your project. But of course, we will liaise at that point individually with each applicant. So yeah, we will then also, for those that are selected, we will be doing contracting of beneficiaries, a little bit of refinement of those proposals, as I just mentioned, and then the implementation period can start from September until August in 2027. And then we do expect reporting on the projects after they've been concluded back in September, October 27. And there will be a little bit of interim reporting that we will be requiring to. Of course, that is far away. We're now talking about proposals and concept notes and everything, but it's important for you to realize the overall timeline of the process. And then, yeah, we can move on to the Q&A. We just put on the screen a couple of questions that we often get. So the first one, what does the role of of EUNIC members and EU delegations entail? I think we touched on that. In a nutshell, what is important is to find the complementarity. So from all the different parts in the triangular partnership, look at what you are missing in your organization. How could the other help you in shaping this? What is the different expertise? What is this particular partner strong in? Where can they come in? Of course, another very important conversation is, where can they come in, like in terms of capacity? What can you expect from one another? So that is, of course, a very important thing to consider when you're writing down what are the roles and responsibilities of each partner. In the proposal, it'll be quite important to specify already when you submit where the different partners come in. So we do expect a very brief description of where this EUNIC partner comes in, where this local partner comes in. And if you have a good, role defined for the EU delegation, what is it going to be? So that's important to already know. Another question we see here, can the activities take place on the continent in Sub-Saharan Africa and in EU countries? We want projects to really be focused on taking place in Sub-Saharan Africa. How will the funds be dispersed between all the partners? Should the funds be split between all 7? No, that's really up to the nature of the project. So between yourselves, you should come with an agreement for this allocation. Of course, it will be up to the main admin lead partner to take care of that. But you should be all in agreement how the funds are going to be split. Evenly split between 7 is probably never going to happen. It depends on who is taking the lead for which particular activity. Yeah, that's the 4th one. How do we find or build strong partnerships if we have never worked with EUNIC members? We know that can be challenging. So that's the topic of what we were discussing before, how to reach EUNIC members, how to present your proposal, how to get in contact, and even to get in conversation. It can be difficult, but do know that the EUNIC network is aware of this program. So when you approach them with a proposal or with a concept idea or a first conversation, most of the EUNIC members, they will be aware that the spaces of culture exist. They might probably also be thinking of a proposal or an idea themselves, so they will be keen to enter discussion with new partners too. So follow some of the steps that we have, this list that we have, come to us when that doesn't work out well. That basically also touches on the last question. There are a few countries where there is no or very, very limited EUNIC members present. So either look in neighboring countries. If that's difficult, come to us and we can see how to help. And then the last one is insights on what makes a strong proposal stand out. Innovation and alignment with local context. I think we discussed that when Teresa went through the different selection criteria. Innovation and the alignment with the local context, they are the most important selection criteria together with the partnership. So really take that into account, really think in terms of what is innovative about your project. Indeed, not in the technological sense, but in all those different senses that Teresa explained. So we do have a little bit of room also for colleagues to come in themselves. I'm going to stop sharing just for a little bit. So looking at how to ultimately apply. So after you've shared the concept note, after you've entered the conversation with the different partners, and you have, your application ready, it's important to follow that we have an application form that needs to be completed in English. Of course, you are free to shape the application form, to formulate it in a different language. It just ultimately needs to be submitted to us in the English language. We have the standard budget form that Teresa explained. This is the form that you need to use. We need that commitment letters from all the listed partners. If an EU delegation, for legal reasons, has issue with sending a letter signed by the ambassador or signed by someone else, they can also submit an email to us. So they can send us an email saying, we, support this project. We are part of the team. If there's any questions about that, of course, do feel free to come back to us. The application forms, the budget form, everything we have in a Google Drive. The Google Drive has the templates. So what we don't do is open up editing rights to work in those documents in the Google Drive. So we would ask you to download those first, then share them, of course, among your partners, and only then start, working in them and editing them, because we need to keep them as templates on our Google Drive. So I'm getting a lot of questions for direct editing access and rights. We unfortunately cannot go there. And then, of course, it's important to keep the deadline date in mind, which is the 21st of June, which is a Sunday, by 12 o'clock midnight, to Spaces of Culture at unicglobal.eu. Yeah, just to recap the essentials of this webinar and of what to do in this webinar is finding the partners, initiating the dialogue, submit your concept idea as soon as possible, but by the 30th of April, we have this final deadline. Who is this for again? Who are the partners? How does this work with the triangular partnership? This is stuff that you can also read back in the call for proposals or when you rewatch this webinar. Of course, consider the maximum available grant and the co-funding and where the co-funding can be coming from, and of course, ultimately the timeline. And then, of course, at any moment when you have a question about eligibility of yourself or one of the partners, or even if you want to test your idea, like your general idea, is this something that would fit in what we're expecting or what we're hoping to see? If there's a question, more technically speaking, about your budgets, can I put this particular part in? How does it work again with the co-funding? Any technical glitch that you might come across, of course, definitely do let us know. Or any other question that's on your or one of your partners' mind, do contact us. You've met us now online, so Toriso and myself, we will share the email addresses as well with you. And of course, when looking at all the different elements and the to-dos and the next steps in your in the conceptualization of your idea, we have frequently asked questions that hopefully answers some that might come up later. It also answers some of the questions that we discussed today. So consult that. It's something that we also keep updated. So if more questions come up that are not in the FAQs, they will appear in there. And also one thing to facilitate the discussion between yourselves as partners, we have resources on fair collaboration in cultural relations that you can consult. That could be really useful for you when sitting around the table with your partners and working on the proposal together. So we will share all this, but keep in mind that we have those different resources available to you. So we can stop the presentation there.